So welcome everybody. We are now officially recording and starting cohort call of Group A for week 9 of Open Hardware Makers, where we'll be talking about road mapping, and it's our peer review week. Alex is going to be doing most of the presenting. So Alex, over to you.
But we are all looking forward to all your additions and comments if I'm forgetting something. So please, next slide. So as always, our announcements. This call will be recorded except for the breakout rooms. And if you don't want to be in the recordings, please turn off your camera if you want to, but turn it on for the breakout rooms. We will probably have one breakout room if time allows it. Because it's also better if you have it on during the breakout room to have a better experience there, to talk to a person with a face. We will upload the recordings, as I already said, to YouTube. In general, all our interactions must respect the community guidelines. If you see somebody or if you see any violation, please reach out to us. And if there are other problems or any questions, please send them to our email, ohwmakers@gmail.com, or write us in the chat or write us via whatever chat system you like. Next slide. Well, what you should already have been discovered is our icebreaker question as every week. This time it was your favorite song. And Andre, or wait, I can now take a look and read them on my own and then read them out loud. We have Andre, who likes Achilles' Last Stand from Led Zeppelin. But I put there a song I was listening quite a lot the last days from Amenra. Probably some metal. Yeah, that's good. Sober from Tool. Just easy listening. That's also fine. Thrown by Bring Me the Horizon, calling the human experience. Well, if you like to look more into this, for me, this is a great inspiration. So I will probably go and look for most of the songs and also listen to some metal later. Well, maybe get a new input. All right, let's give it a go and start into today's topic call. Please, next slide. Today, we are talking about road mapping. It's about peer review. The expert assessment, we are currently collecting the feedback and preparing a package for you, which you will receive probably in the next days until next week. All right, next slide. That's what I already said. Thank you for sending us the information. Now a quick recap about the previous week. We were talking about digital fabrication, accessible documentation, bills of material, bills of skills, and so forth, and user and developer guides. And the topic in general was open hardware specifics. This week, it's about road mapping. And I was looking for images on free, royalty-free images. And now it looks like a startup webpage. We have road mapping, in general, what's road mapping and how to do road mapping, then how to manage time, and how to evaluate risks, or why is evaluating risks important for your project. You should have already had a look at our curriculum. We are, as always, just touching the topics. You find more detailed information online in the curriculum section, in the respective section. And I also want to point out that there are assignments, and we don't heavily enforce you to do the assignments, but you should do it if you want to follow the program and take the most out of it. So just FYI. So today we will talk a bit more about some of the content which is in this week. Next slide, please. yeah, road mapping and evaluating risk. And afterwards, we will have a Q&A as always. So road mapping and well, planning progress in general, I just want to quickly introduce to you like the principle of a roadmap and tell you a bit more about it. And then I actually want to encourage like a small discussion about what's actually hard for you, what's the challenge for you with managing time. For those who are not really familiar with the concept of a roadmap basically summarizes goals and it includes a timeline. Yesterday, we had a guest speaker from Mozilla with the other cohort because we are like flipping this around. And she said that the minimal viable roadmap is basically a timeline with goals. So this is the minimal viable roadmap you should set up for your project as well. So now the question, why is a roadmap useful? Why should you do it? It's really good to also schedule work and more importantly, also track goals. Sometimes it feels like you're just working on something and don't well see maybe like direct progress, but having a roadmap and being able to just check off maybe some to-dos in the timeline makes you also realize that you are doing progress, that you are progressing. And well, not only for yourself, it's also great to share the state of the project. So other people can actually see where are you at. So what's the state of your project? Where do you need help? And what are the next events, for example, which are coming up? Another very interesting thing is if you are developing your roadmap, what we suggest is that you are doing this in reverse. This will be, well, and what it does is it also brings forth a lot of dependencies. So you might realize that to do a certain thing, you need maybe another thing to be finished. This is a dependency. Or you need, for example, just a really simple and obvious dependency is if you need parts, then you need to order them, right? So this is a dependency. Before you can build something, you need to order the parts need to arrive, and so on. And we will talk about this later as an example also when we are evaluating risks, because as you might have realized already, there is something called chip shortage nowadays. And well, shipping time and so on, especially from overseas, is sometimes not really well set anymore. And they are like very long shipping times at the moment. So this is, for example, a risk which should be evaluated and well taken care of. Anyway, how to build a roadmap? As I already said, we suggest you to do reverse planning. So start with the maybe like the minimal viable project, which we discussed in another cohort call, and then plan from there. So which things do you really need to build your minimal viable project, and then try to time them. Try to estimate the time you need for the different intermediate steps, and then set also milestones. Milestones could be important product states or functions or functionalities in general. I mean, it's super easy for a software, for example, to define the implementation of a certain feature as a milestone, and you can do a similar thing also for your open hardware project, of course. Another milestone could be important dates or also deadlines, and not only like dates which directly affect your project, but also maybe external dates. For example, you want to join MOSFest. MOSFest is a really great, well, festival, an internet festival, which is like generally focused on open in any ways, in any facet. And maybe you want to present or, well, pitch or whatever your project on MOSFest. And what you can do then is take the date of the MOSFest as a deadline or as a milestone until when you want to, for example, have certain features ready of your project. All right. The most important and probably also the hardest part is to estimate the time requirement for certain things. And that's something I want to play back a bit to you. And I want to ask you, or I want you to discuss, what are your challenges of time management? And exactly, we are here. So what do you find hard to time, and what took you more time than you thought if you already wrote your roadmap? You can, as always, you can leave us also your comments in the document. And if you want, please unmute yourself and just speak up. But as I said, if you leave comments in the document, you can either then also verbalize them, or I will read them. Go ahead. You can also take your time and think. Just go ahead and unmute yourself when you are ready. Thank you.
Hi, Andrew.
It's a bit loud over here, over there. But if you want, you can just leave your comments in the text and I will read them if there's too much background noise. I will share the document in the chat again. There are already things coming in. Everybody is done with typing, but take your time, please. And thank you very much for putting so many good statements, which I already see here in the document. All right. I don't see any cursor moving anymore. I don't know if it's my internet connection or you are done writing, but
I think it's a little bit on your side, but yeah, I think Alex L is the one just still adding stuff, but yeah, that's fine. I think we can go ahead.
All right. So does anybody want to like speak up about their well, challenge?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
If nobody else. So I think Alex has the same problem that I saw, as where you don't really know how much time team members can spend on a project or can or how much time they need, right? So for the things that I do, which was 3D modeling, I have a very good idea of what I can do in how much time. But yeah, for others it's really difficult. So I guess it probably takes time to get all the others involved and get their commitments. So it needs input from all the team members. And one thing I didn't put down, which also I realized is a thing, often we're waiting for feedback. So, and that feedback is coming from outside of the team. And so then it's even harder to ask for commitment, or, you can't really control what people outside of the team, how fast they respond.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And I think Andreas will also add some things on that, because I mean, if you're working on a voluntary project, as he writes, then this is also getting even more complicated, because you can't demand involvement at some point. Do you want to add something here, Andreas? What was your experience there?
Yes, exactly. That was my point. So yeah, I guess, well, like what was said before, estimating how much something would take is relatively easy. But if it's not for yourself, or if you have a team member which works on and off, and it's a voluntary project, and so cannot really commit to any time per week or so. So he or she just works when he has time for it. That's really hard to plan.
Absolutely. That's always the problem with, like, or not always, but with voluntary projects, this is often the problem. So just a thing, I want to comment on that, and everybody is also welcome to comment on this, like together, because I think a way we tried to actually solve this and also make clear what is the time commitment, we just try to estimate it and also put it on our website, for example, for the program, right? So everybody knows what the time commitment is, and yeah, you can't force anybody to well, work the hours you write somewhere. But I mean, it's a different, well, let's say, commitment. If you say, well, I want to be part of this project, and on the website or somewhere there's listed this needs this much time commitment, it's a completely different story, because you knew how much time it would be. And what we also encourage is that you talk, because communication is the most important part here, right? So if I'm running out of time, and if we all have limited time, obviously, and I can't make it, if you usually communicate this like clearly, then that's often not as big as a problem as if you don't communicate and just let the time slip by and nothing happens, right? So talking about it, making it clear, asking the people how much time can they actually commit, and also let them adjust that over time, re-asking them, because sometimes you always, like, you want to get started with the project, are excited, and then you see, well, oh wow, that this takes more time than I thought, and I can't dedicate as much time as I like. So asking this repeatedly, how much time can you really commit, is also a good practice. Just as a suggestion. Does anybody else have any comments on that?
I was going to make another suggestion, which was maybe having, I mean, even if people cannot attend every single time, but having like a day of the week with like 1 hour maybe, right? Where you have like separated time, and you say like, this is kind of like open hours, like open office hours for whoever wants to contribute, even if you're doing things asynchronously and online, just by the fact that there is that little spot on the week where it's like a standing thing every week at the same time, the same day. This might help people organize themselves around it, right? And it takes away a little bit of the pressure, like this has to be done by that date. It's like more like, oh, you come, and if you can work an hour on this for like every week, it's already a huge contribution, right? Something like that.
So there's another comment, rewriting some bits of software to make the hardware useful. Some programming scripts are taking much longer than thought. Devising time between this project and others projects going on with deadlines, learning about OH, like open hardware, and how to do open hardware documentation and so on, as well as developing the project. Yeah, basically everything, right? Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so maybe I think the devising time between this project and other project are already been addressed, so that is fine. Then the thing with the documentation, there is quite a lot of material about doing open hardware, and because I'm quite new, there's a lot to digest, but also because I'm also part of the project to develop, it's like a lot going on in a sense. And yeah, I guess for some parts it's always writing software. It's always, you think it will go well, and then there is a lot of debugging to do, and then you don't know why something doesn't work necessarily well with the component you choose. So actually, the time that you plan to write something just take longer than expected. So I think it's just a good learning process to learn about time management and challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to summarize this also a bit as troubleshooting in general. Troubleshooting in general is really hard to time. Like this is, that's, well, also a risk. And that's why we want to talk also a bit more about risk evaluation. So what could be the pitfalls and so on. But anyways, yeah. What I can say is that we are so glad that you are putting so much energy in your open hardware projects and are contributing to the open hardware community. That's something. Each minute you put into, like all of you, all projects you put into the open hardware community is a minute worth it. And it takes a long time to work through, yeah, as you said, documentation and so on, but it's really worth it. And you are contributing to something which is, well, basically a good cause in general. Andre, do you have any comments, additions about road mapping, how to start this? Maybe a comment on long-term projects or something like this?
Yeah, it's more of a comment on long-term, I think, right? So, and this goes a little bit with odds, or the issue with programming and coding and so on, which is, these are perfect examples of why we need to create a lot of like entry points for the projects, right? And also break down the tasks into very like small actionable things. Because maybe for your coding, maybe it's gonna, like you initially thought, oh, this is like a 1 hour, 2 hour job. And so I'll just do it myself and it'll be quicker and so on, right? But then you realize it takes you like 5, 10 hours and so on, right? It might have been, I mean, for next time, right? Like better in the beginning to sit down, write it down as an issue, like make it publicly available, and then like wait if this was not a pressing thing, right? I mean, and this is just how like the roadmap helps you, right? Because in a way you're like hyper focused on solving like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But then if you do roadmap and then you say, okay, my actual goal is to, I don't know, have a demo ready for like MOSFET, like Alex mentioned, right? Then is the code that you have enough? And if so, can you just create issues for people? I mean, I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm just like trying to reiterate the idea of like stop and try to like zoom out of the project and think about it, like how can I try to hook people in all the time, right? Into these things, and do I really need to do them now? Or sorry, my minimal viable project is fine the way it is, and then we're gonna move on to the next thing. Right.
I actually want to comment a bit on how do we actually, like in practical, how do you do a roadmap? Like, and where do you share it and how do you share it? Because I think actually I forgot to mention this earlier. I mean, there are different ways. A roadmap, like the very simplest version of a roadmap is basically just a text document with dates, right? And different actions, different steps in between. There are other tools out there. So if you already are on GitHub, for example, you can use a Kanban board. A Kanban board is also a really nice tool for project management, where you have different swim lines, like a Trello board, for example. I don't know, maybe most of you already know what a Kanban board is, but you can have items on this swim lines and then put them also in a avoiding this word, in a timed order. And what you can also do is, sort it in a way you like it. GitHub has also the feature to add milestones, so you can actually see how much of your subtasks you already managed to fulfill, to complete your milestone and so on. But there are so many other project management tools out there as well. And please just look around, and as always, so this is our credo. Look at projects you like, because good open hardware and open source projects in general should always have a roadmap. They should. if they are bigger and long-term projects. Look for these projects and look at their roadmaps, and you will see there are many different ones out there. You can also, for example, have just a blog post. This was also an example from yesterday, a blog post where you are just summarizing what you are doing now, or what you completed, or what you are working on now, and what are the next steps. And this brings me to another really important point: adjust your roadmap. Because when you are driving on your road, you might realize that some things might, well, for example, take longer. And then you can also try and account more time to other similar tasks which should happen later. So adjust it all the time. It's nothing which is fixed. It should be easily editable. Not edible, but editable. Sorry, today is my language day. I don't know. Anyway, you get what my point. And just try it, just give it a go. And if you want to have feedback, ask your mentor, build your roadmap. And if you have not done this yet, talk to them about your roadmap and get feedback. All right, if you have questions, you can always ask us as well, but that's what your mentor is for. And you realize during this program, we are talking actually more about non-technical things than actually technical things, but they are so important, especially for open hardware projects. Andre?
No, nothing. It was interesting, but then it doesn't matter.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. Because as I already introduced, I wanted to talk a bit more about evaluating risks, and that's also closely connected to what can go wrong and how do you have to fix it as troubleshooting, and identifying external factors for the projects. So the project depends on. And I mean, the easiest and simplest example is, well, shipping time and part availability. You probably will realize at some point, if you are building, for example, an electronics projects with a bunch of different parts, and the more parts you have, the higher the probability that some will be short at some point. I mean, this is what we see right now. Some chips are really, well, basically not existing anymore, and you can't order them. And this brings many electronics projects, well, to the edge. And yeah, how to account for that? So there are different possibilities. I mean, probably nobody expected it to be that bad how it is right now, but you can, well, plan for it. You can evaluate this risk and also have a plan B if this happens. So what would a plan B for example, part shortage be? I want to ask you.
Well, you can switch to another chip, but this often means you have to redesign your old circuit board. And this means that it takes a lot of time again, because you have to select a new chip, you have to go through the design process, and then you have to again to work to the manufacturer. And you have to hope that by redesigning it, you won't change chips that are then become in shortage.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, maybe that's a solution, a workaround, let's say. It's not a solution, probably. It's rather a workaround. And yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Because this was something that happened to us as well, and somebody came up with a little nice hack that I thought, which was we were building this controller for these open flexural microscopes, and the chip itself that goes on the controller is in shorted, like it's short. But then if you go on Amazon or eBay, they're selling these Chinese boards based on the same chip. And so we're buying that, desoldering from the board and soldering onto the other one, right? So maybe sometimes trying to think about who else might have the components that you need and where you can scavenge them from, right? Maybe other projects, or maybe like old projects or things like that. I don't know.
Yeah, but obviously this has some limits, because I mean, you can't do hundreds depending on what your plan is. But well, this is at least a solution for prototyping. And looking at availability is always a good thing. If you are ordering electronic parts, take a look, where are they available, in which stock? But this is, I think, only now a real huge problem. All right. What are other external factors? For example, also deadlines. Maybe you have like a hard deadline for your project because it's just making something up, part of your thesis, and you need to finish your thesis. And yeah, well, with your thesis, you have to finish the project. Or you have you get support, money support, and it's a project funded by whatever an organization, and you just need to prepare a report, or the product has to be finished until the end of this period of this funding. These are external factors, and like in general, it's always a good thing to well, to have some time in the backhand. So just have a time buffer. And like something my supervisor was telling me always is just to plan 50% of my availability, of my available time, because that's what you actually need for all the other things which you can't plan for, right? I mean, we don't have like the perfect solution. It's actually something you and we are currently learning, and like all the time learning. So what I want you to be like, what I want you to do now, and also want to talk a bit more about, like, evaluate the risks of your project. Just think about it. I mean, they don't have to like really happen, and the emergencies don't have to like really like take place then, but just be aware what could go wrong and learn from your projects, because you get so much experience when you are building your first open hardware project, and you are learning all the time. And that's important. You can maybe assess the time you need for programming a whatever script wrong the very first time. The first time it's okay. The second time it's stupid to do the same mistake again. I think there was a German saying about something like this, but I don't recall it, and I don't know if it's really interesting for you to hear a German saying. That's why we are now going to the next slide, because we want to put you into breakout rooms now, and we want you to think a minute or two about your project and what the risks are with your project. And then you will have a few minutes also to talk to your peer. And then in the end, we will come back and exchange what you were talking about and what are the main risks for your project. All right. Andre, can you put people in breakout rooms?
They are already shipped.
All right. The questions should be also in the document. And please, you can always leave already the comments and write into the document right away. See you later. No, the questions are not in the comments. Which was
In the comments?
No, not in the comments.
Oops. Andrew?
Andrew.
So Andrew has 2 instances where he's logged on, so it might be that this one is just going to stay here. Is it recording? Stop. Yeah, we're now recording again.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome back. So I will quickly take a look at the notes you left, but all right. I think everybody is also invited to unmute yourself if your background noise is low.
It's so difficult. I'm taking some.
Okay.
Pardon?
Okay, this is not
We cannot hear you.
work,
There
unfortunately.
is a lot of
On the
background.
project, I'm working alone
Is
because
it possible for you
I
to go
had a
somewhere
group
where
of
the
people I was
background
working
noise
with.
is low? Or
But as
please
you know,
leave
the
your comment in the document, because I don't think you left a comment. Do you want to speak now? All right, anyways, I will
yeah,
go.
I got
Go ahead.
I got some question that am I working on the project alone? This is the question I want to answer. I had a group of guys I was working with, but as you know, the youth of these days, they're not tolerant of what people are doing. They think when you call them to carry out something innovative, they expect the payment, and yet you are trying to just come up with something which can yield a good result ahead, and then you get benefits in the future. So they fail to understand. So I'm now left alone.
Ah, I see. Okay. So that's actually a really huge risk which hit you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, having a team and other team members drop, that's like, well, not really nice, and something I guess you can't really plan for, right?
But that one, but still that one cannot break me down, because I was the driver and I'm the head behind the whole stuff. So what I get from them is I was trying to invest the little knowledge I have in them, but since they fail to understand, and then I have to drop them off. Then I was thinking of finishing up with
Then
this.
focus
When
on
I
that,
start,
what you can do, and maybe you find other people who can join you, right?
yeah, but now even if I don't get some people to join me, this is the project I already worked on. I have it already on board. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to transfer this one and print a board, the PCB board, and transfer each of these electronic items on them.
All right. Sorry, I think I quickly lost the connection. Yeah, maybe somebody else also wants to share their risk evaluation. I see that there are some already in the document. I quickly have to go back there. So I will just read it out, so other people can also contribute now. So I see, yeah, well, team members leaving mid-project and maybe not finding the right resource to continue their work. Yeah, that's something Andrew was also now addressing, right? That's a pity. Parts shortage not really a topic for early phase. Usually, normally, easily obtainable and replaceable Raspberry Pi helps. Modularity, 3D printing, no long supply chains. Yeah, of course, modularity is really great. That's a really important point, and I think we already discussed that in earlier cohort calls. But something I want to point out is the Raspberry Pi, because I don't know how it is for you, but I think buying a Raspberry Pi is now a thing of luck sometimes. At least finding an affordable one for the Raspberry Pi Model 4, but I think that's also affected. No?
Yeah, right now you cannot buy them anywhere. So many people bought some in the past. They are like everywhere. Just have to ask enough people.
You mean you have to have a great stock of Raspberry Pis, and then it's fine?
Yeah, you just have to know enough people who have bought one when they came out or something like that. But there are many out there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, you can also, well, let's say a Raspberry Pi is like a basic module, right? And there should be some flying around. And this actually, like we can, like what we can deduce from that is that you should use, well, off-the-shelf products which are easily replaceable also, and like everywhere available. And I don't know, Raspberry Pi is not available everywhere in the same quantity, but at least it's like well spread. Andre, do you have experience with like parts with trend in Africa? Because I guess it's also a huge problem in other countries. And if we are talking now about parts and where they are available, maybe this is also a good input.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a problem. It really depends on which country you are and where you are. And for us, at least, I mean, the one thing we've learned is that AliExpress basically arrives eventually pretty much anywhere in the world, but it takes time. And so, like, considering things like Amazon and so on is a no-go, but rather like Chinese suppliers are more reliable in that sense than Amazon and so on, right? Which then also means that you need to like double plan, and sometimes asking somebody to bring it over or having somebody to buy it somewhere else and then ship it over to you might be also a good idea. Yeah. We did focus a lot on this idea of parts, which is the raging problem at the moment, right, for a lot of people. But I guess you could also think about risk evaluation in a way like what needs to happen for this project to become completely independent, right, of a person or a technology or a thing, right, if that is possible. And so maybe you could think about risk in that sense, like how do we make this more sturdy to like lack of things and people and so on, right? So I guess a lot of it could be seen as documentation again issues, right? So like what happens if person X leaves the project tomorrow? Is everything what they were doing really well documented? Because if it was, then it's much easier to onboard in case somebody else appears, right? What is part X doing in the project? Is this really well documented? Because if it is, then it's also much easier to think about a replacement or somebody suggests a replacement, right? So maybe like risk evaluation is something definitely to consider, but then thinking about also in terms of like how does it help me make it this project completely independent or sturdy to change, right? In that sense, might be useful. And I think, I mean, Richard and Andrew might have a much better idea than we do. And as he's writing, right, like the refugee camps getting access to some spare electronics is really difficult, and so this slows down the whole process. Would you like to comment on that, Richard? No?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Okay. So yeah, I was like, you know, in the development of the project, more especially the project that I'm working on the water dispenser, that the problem is when there is actually a short circuit or maybe a component fails to work, it's difficult to have a replacement for it, because from the camp to the town is actually a long distance. So actually, that's one of the project. That's one of the problems that I have, because I'm the only one actually working on the project. I don't have a team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe this is like a very silly suggestion, but maybe something that is useful for you and for other people. There is a community of other people in the camp and in other places, right, that are working with, I mean, they're not working on this specific project, but they are certainly working with like electronics, right? And so, as you said, right, like it takes time to move from the camp into town and so on. Maybe, I don't know if this is possible again, right? Like this is more of a naive suggestion. Coordinate like maybe like monthly runs to town, and then people kind of like coordinate the efforts of making a list what everybody needs, and then like one person goes or something like that, right? Even if people are not working on the same project, like trying to help each other out in terms of the common infrastructure problems and how you can basically work around that as a group of, even if you are doing like different problems, like projects, right? Yeah, so I don't know if this makes sense at all. I'm sorry to cut this discussion short, but I want to be mindful of time. We are reaching the end of our cohort call. It's now 2 minutes to the end of the call. And as usual, here are your next steps. So next week, we do not meet in a cohort call, but you should schedule a meeting with your mentor. And we only see each other back on the 2nd of June, I think. The 1st of June is a Wednesday. Yeah, the 2nd of June, we see each other. Sorry about that. On Monday, as usual, you're going to get an email with the outline for week 10, talking about licenses and standards, right? And as usual, you can also always contact us using our email, ohwmakers@gmail.com, or in the Gosh forum via private messages or a thread message. And especially different this week, we're going to send over the reviews from the experts to those of you who did send us your expert package.
Can I say something?
Yeah, and you can definitely ask something, Andrew. What's up? Hello? Andrew? I guess for those of you who need to leave, you can leave, and we can hang around a little bit longer to see if Andrew manages to establish the connection back and ask whatever he wants to ask. I'm going to stop the recording now. Bye-bye to all of you.